Hey besties, welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we'll be learning how to make this really beautiful summer dress. This dress has a notch collar and it has buttons in front. It is also an A-shaped dress. This is a very feminine and classy dress, and this is perfect for the summer. If you'd love to know how to make this, stick with me to the end of this tutorial so you don't miss any process. Now let's get right into this tutorial. With me here, I have the fabric I'll be using to recreate this style. This is a cotton shirt fabric. I got it from a store that sells shirt materials. So that was where I got this. And I have about 4 yards here. I also have a lining that matches the color of the fabric. I'll be using this pattern paper to draft out the pattern for this dress. You can already see that I have 2 lines here. From the top of your pattern paper, come down by about 6 inches and rule a straight line across. This is going to be for the collar of your dress. And then from the center front, come in by about 4 inches and rule a straight line across. This part is going to be for the lapel of the collar and also for the buttonhole in front. And I also made sure that the length of my pattern paper is long enough to contain the length of my dress. Place your tape there at the starting line to take out your vertical measurement. This starting line is also going to serve as your shoulder line. Then first you're going to mark your shoulder to your bust point. For me it's 11.5 inches and I'm going to mark it on both sides. Next is your shoulder to your under bust. Mine is 15 inches. Shoulder to waistline, mine is 18 inches. I'll also be marking that across, and then I'll connect this with a straight line. The next measurement you'll be taking is going to be from your waistline to your hip line. So for me, my waist to hip line is 8 inches, so I'm going to mark that down and connect with a straight line. To take the full length of the dress, place the tape also at the starting line and mark down how long you want your dress to be. For me, I'll be using 56 inches. I'll go ahead to label this for more clarity. This is the length of my dress. This right here is the shoulder line, the bust point, under bust, waistline, and this is the hip line. Remember that all your measurements are starting after this line here. So coming in from this place on the shoulder line, mark 3 inches for your neck width and then come down by 3 inches. This is the standard neckline measurement. Go ahead and connect this with a curve. Because of the collar, we'll also be marking the back neckline here. Using the same width, just come down by 1.5 inch and then connect this with a curve. I'll just be labeling this front neckline and back neckline. On the shoulder line also, mark half of your shoulder measurement. For me, it is 8.5. Come down from that point by 1 inch to get your shoulder slope and then connect it into the neckline. From the shoulder slope here, we are going to be marking our chest line measurement. And if you already follow me on here, you know the calculation for the chest line is your round bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. I got 8.25. So from the shoulder slope, I'm going to mark down 8.25. Connect that with a straight line. I'll just label this the chest line CL. On this chest line now, also mark half of your shoulder measurement so you can get a straight line to the shoulder slope. Mark half of your nipple to nipple measurement on the bust point, on the under bust, the waistline, the hip line, and connect this together with a straight line. Now I'm connecting this all the way to the length. You don't have to do this, it is totally unnecessary, okay? Divide what you have there from the shoulder slope to the chest line by 2. Mark the midpoint there. Using your curve, connect this into the bust point just like I'm doing here. After doing that, you're going to come down from that point by 0.5 inch and come up by 0.5 inch. This new point you just marked, you'll be connecting it back into the bust point. You'll be cancelling this first line here because you will no longer be needing it. Now you're going to take the measurement of what you have here and you'll be replacing it on the side so that when you are done sewing it, the side is not shorter than the center. So what I have here is 1 inch. I'm going to be extending this side line by 1 inch. On the waistline, come out on both sides of the dark leg by 0.5 inch and connect this to the bust point. Come down from the waistline by about 4 inch and connect it back into the waistline. Now you can see the reason why I said you shouldn't draw your line all the way to the length of your dress. Stopping at the hip line is perfectly okay. Now we are going to be taking our round body measurements. On the chest line, mark quarter of your bust measurements. For me, it's 10 inches. Take what you have in between that there. For me, it's 0.5 inch and I'm going to replace it. And then add your stitching allowance. I'll be using 1.5 inch. Connect from that point there into what you have on your chest line to get your armhole curve. On the bust point, mark quarter of your bust measurements. Add your stitching allowance. On the waistline, you are going to mark quarter of your waist measurement. Take what you have in between your darts. For me is 1 inch. Replace that there. Add your stitching allowance. On the hip line, mark quarter of your hip measurement. Make sure to add an extra inch because of the little exaggerated hip we have, and then add your stitching allowance. I'm going to take what I have here on my hip line, which is about 14.5 inches, and I'm going to mark the same thing on the length of the dress. Now, because of the A-line shape of this dress, I'll be adding an extra 2 inches to what I have here on the length of my dress, so it forms an A-line shape. Now go ahead and connect all these points together just like you will see me doing. I'll just be using my marker to outline all these points so it's very visible. I already took out my bust dart and this is how I did it. Usually your shoulder to your waistline in front is longer than your shoulder to your waistline at the back, and this is because of the presence of the bust in front. And usually this difference is about 1.5 inch or 2 inches. Now to make the shoulder to the waist in front same with the shoulder to the waist at the back, what you need to do is to take out a bust dart in front. So what you need to do is to come down from the bust point by 1.5 inch like I did here and connect it into the bust point. Now I already used my marker to outline this to make it very visible for you guys. I'll be using my pencil to shade this to show you guys that this particular part we are going to be taking it out much later when we are cutting this out. For the buttonhole, first of all you need to determine where you want your buttons to start. For me, I'm going to come up by 1 inch from the bust point, and then from that point I'll be going out by 1.25 inch for my buttonhole space. So I'll just be marking that all the way to the length of my dress, and then I'll connect this together. So this right here is going to be my buttonhole space. I changed my mind and I decided to reduce that by about ½ inch, so I'll just come down by ½ inch and I'll be cancelling this other line here because I won't be needing it anymore. Now for the lapel and the neck collar, pay attention. This is quite easy, you just need to understand it. What you need to do first is you need to connect a straight line from your buttonhole here straight into the neckline, and make sure to extend this line for the neck collar. Take the measurement of what you have on your back neckline. For me, I have about 4 inches. Now you'll be marking the 4 inches on this line you extended, starting from the shoulder upward. You can see how I placed my tape. Mark what you got there. From this point here, I'm going to go in by about 0.5 inch. This is going to help the collar to sit perfectly on your neck, and connect that back into this point. Go ahead and cancel this other line as you no longer be needing it. From this point, mark 3.5 inches diagonally. You can see how I'm placing that there, not straight, just mark it diagonally like I'm doing here. Then connect it with a straight line. For the lapel, come out by about 3 inches from the front neckline and connect this with a straight line back to the front neckline like this. Then from this point, you are going to connect it back into the buttonhole. As you can see here, we have created the lapel. To create the notch between the lapel and the collar, what you are going to do is to come up from this point by 1 inch. And from that point, you go in by 1.5 inch. Also mark 1.5 inch on this other side here. Then from this point, you are going to go in by about 0.5 inch. Connect this point here into the 0.5 inch you just marked. Then connect this back into the collar up there. I'm going to go in by about 0.5 inch here and connect it back into that point because I want my collar to sit perfectly on the neck. Then I'm just going to be outlining this place here. You can see here that we've created the collar and we've created the lapel. This is pretty easy to do, and I'll be labeling this the lapel and this the neck collar. For the halter neck effect, you'll be connecting a curve from this point into the armhole. I'll be using my curve to do this, so just watch how I'm doing this to know how to go about yours. You can see here that we've created the halter neck effect. We are done with the front pattern. I'll just label this the front and go ahead and cut it out. Please watch how I'm cutting this out carefully so you know exactly how to cut yours. Now getting to this point, because of this dart here, this side might end up being shorter than the center when you are done stitching it down. So what you need to do is take what you have in between the dart. For me is 0.5 inch, and I'm going to mark it up here and connect it back into my curve just like I've done here. Then go ahead and continue cutting this out. When you get to the butt dart, make sure you give some space like I'm doing here. Then cut out the rest of your pattern paper. To eliminate this butt dart, what you do is to open up this place all the way to the bust point, and then you will use this side to cover up the butt dart and tape this down. This automatically eliminates the butt dart. Then what you'll be doing to the side here, the reason why we left this space is because when you eliminate this dart, there might be some difference between the line. Just blend that out and go ahead and cut it out. Now we are done eliminating the bust dart. This makes the shoulder to the waist in front same length with the shoulder to the waist at the back. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out on my fabric. I'm done cutting out my fabric using my pattern paper, and I made sure to cut out 2 pieces for each side and also cut out the lining. For the collar, I made sure to cut out 2 pieces for this. I'll be using one for the lining of the collar, and also make sure that you cut this on fold just like I did here. Now the next thing you are going to do here is bring the collar and place it to the upper part like this. What we'll be doing here is to note the point where the notch is going to start at the lapel. Okay, so just mark that point where the notch starts at the lapel. You can see how I'm doing that there. Then coming to this point, you are going to mark the point where the halter neck is going to start on the collar. So this is where the halter neck is. I'll be marking it also on the collar. Now go ahead and notch this point, the part where the notch between the collar and the lapel is going to start. This is going to help you to know how to place your collar. You'll understand this further in the tutorial. Now to draft out the back piece, I've already gone ahead to mark my lines just like we did for the front. First here I have my shoulder line, the back neck line, the chest line, bust point, the waistline. Remember that the shoulder to the waist at the back is 1.5 inch shorter than the shoulder to the waist in front. That was why we took out the dart in front. So the shoulder to waist in front for me was 18 inches. So 18 inches minus 1.5, that's what gave me 16.5. Then from this point you will mark your waist to hip line. Mine is 8 inches, and then the length of your dress. Mark half of your nipple to nipple measurement on the chest line, the bust point, the waistline and the hip line, and connect this with a straight line. On the waistline, go out on both sides of your dart by 0.5 inch. Come down from the chest line by about 0.75 inch and connect this back into the waistline like this. To connect this to the hip line, come down from the waistline by about 3 inches and connect this into the waistline. Now that we are done with our dart, to get the armhole curve, divide what you have there from the shoulder slope to the chest line by 2. Come in by 0.5 inch. Mark quarter of your bust measurement on the chest line and connect this together with a curve to form your armhole curve. We already marked quarter of our bust measurement on the chest line, so I'll just be adding 1.5 inch stitching allowance. On the waistline, mark quarter of your waist measurement. Take what you have in between your dart. Mine is 1 inch. Replace that there, and then mark your stitching allowance. Mark quarter of your hip measurement on your hip line. Add extra 1.5 inch for that exaggerated hip and add your stitching allowance. Take what you have there on your hip line and mark it on the length. Also, don't forget to add 2 extra inches because of the A shape of this dress. Now go ahead and connect this together just like you see me doing. I'll just be outlining this chest line here, and from the chest line here I'll come down by 0.5 inch and connect it back into the armhole. Now go ahead and cut this out just like you see me doing. After cutting this out, this is what I have. I'll go ahead and cut this out on my fabric. Make sure that when cutting this out on your fabric that you cut it on fold, and this is because the back doesn't have any zipper. Now the next thing I'll do here is to replicate my dart on my fabric. This is going to make it easier for me to stitch down my dart on my fabric. So to replicate the dart, I'm just going to mark this midpoint here, this other point at the upper one, and also the width of the dart on the waistline. Then I'll go ahead and connect this together. I've marked out my darts on both sides of my fabric, and I also did the same thing on the main fabric. Go to your machine and stitch down the darts that you just created. The next thing you'll be doing here now is to bring out the collar. You can see that I have that notched point that I did on the collar area on, and also I have 2 pieces of the collar here. What I'm going to do now is to place the collar right sides facing each other, pin down this center here to keep it in place. You'll be making a stitch from this point of the notch to this other point. You'll be leaving this side open here, and then you will stitch down this side and stitch down the under part of the collar. Let me repeat this. First, you are going to make a stitch between this notch here, then you will leave this part open, stitch down the sides and stitch down the under part. For the main dress, I'll be taking out my pattern paper and I'll be using just one to illustrate what I'll be doing. Go ahead and pin down this part and stitch it down using 1/2 inch stitching allowance. Okay, after stitching it down, make sure to make a notch around your stitch and go ahead and iron your seam open. You can see that I've done mine here, and this is what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the right side, and you can see that I did it to both sides of my front piece. Now for the collar, make sure to make a notch around all the points that you stitch down, just like I'm doing here. Then go ahead and trim out the excess. You'll be turning this over to the right side to make sure that the sharp edges come out pretty nice, just like I'm doing here. Then go ahead and give this a really good press. After giving it a good press, you can see how this came out. You can see all the points we stitched down, and this side is open, and we'll be attaching this to the front piece. To attach this to the front piece, I'll be taking it to the machine to show you guys how I'm going to do this. Now you're going to bring in your front piece, and you're going to make sure the right side is facing upward. Looking at it, remember we made a notch around this lapel area. Now you're going to bring in your collar and you're going to place it on the notch just like this. Now bring in your lining. The lining also has a notch because we notched it together with the main fabric. You are going to place the notch also on this point here. Now make sure you are placing it right sides facing each other, okay? Now what you'll be doing here is just to basically stitch this down. I'm going to do that starting from this end here. Now if you notice, as I'm stitching this down, I'm making sure that I'm arranging the curved collar, because you know the collar is curved, so you have to arrange it as you go, just like I'm doing here. After making this stitch, you can see how beautiful this looks. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other collar, so you can watch it to see how I did that again. After stitching this down, make sure you notch around the stitch you made and trim out the excess. I'll turn this over to the right side, and this is how beautiful it looks. The next thing you are going to do here now is you're going to stitch down the lining and the main fabric at the length. Also, do not forget that the lining is about 1.5 inch to 2 inch shorter than the main fabric, so place them together. stitch it down using about 0.5 inch stitching allowance. After stitching it down, you can see that because the lining is shorter, it took up the fabric inside, therefore giving a hemless finish. Okay, I'm just going to turn this over to the right side also so you can see what we have. What you'll be doing now is to stitch this down at the center front where the buttonhole is. So pick up the fabric this way and pick up the lining in the opposite direction. Place them together this way and turn them over to the wrong side. The reason why I did it this way is because it's going to help the collar to stay out of the way, thereby making it easy for you to stitch down. You can see right here that the collar is out of the way. So what you will do now is to stitch this down from the top all the way to the length of your dress using 1/2 inch stitching allowance, and make sure to do this on both sides of your fabric. Now for the back piece, you will see that I'm done stitching down the dart, and also I've joined the lining and the main fabric together up here and also at the length. Now what I'll just be doing next is to stitch it down at the sides using about 0.5 inch stitching allowance. And when I get to this point here, I'm going to be leaving a space because I'll be needing to turn this over to the right side. After stitching this down, you can see what I have. I'm just going to go ahead and trim out the excess, and I'll be turning this over to the right side like this. Make sure that you notch this part here so you can turn out this sharp edge so it looks very neat in front. After turning that over, you can see how beautiful it came out. The next thing I'm going to do now is to also stitch it down from the halter neck all the way into the length of the side. And when you are stitching it down all the way into the length of the side, make sure that you leave some inches around this area so you'll be able to turn it to the right side. And make sure that when you are stitching this down that the collar is out of the way. You don't want your collar to get caught in the stitch. And I'll be doing the same thing to both sides of my fabric. For the back piece, after making my stitch, you can see what I have. I'm going to just go ahead and trim out the excess. I can see the area there where I left space to turn out my fabric, so I'm just going to go ahead to turn out my fabric and give it a good press. After giving it a good press, you can see how beautiful this came out. Now what I'm going to do is just to maybe create a top stitch at this place that I left open. I'm going to bring in my front piece and I'll be placing it right side to the back piece like this. I'm going to align that properly. So what you'll just be doing here is to take out your body measurement and go to your machine and stitch this down at the sides. After stitching this down at the sides, this is what you should have. Make sure to give this a good press. Now it's time to insert the buttons. Okay, so for me, this is where my buttons are going to be starting, directly on where the lapel stops. For a female dress, the buttonhole should be on the right hand side while the buttons should be on the left hand side. So I'll be marking the places for the buttonhole. Starting up here, I'll be marking 3 inches. So the spacing for my buttonhole, I'll be using 3 inches, and I'll mark that all the way to where I want it to stop. After inserting my buttons, you can see how beautiful this came out. I decided to attach a pocket to this. This is totally optional. You can decide not to attach a pocket to yours. And yeah, that's all for this tutorial. This is how we came about this beautiful summer dress. I'll see you guys in my next tutorial.